the one who taught me how to badge and has been guiding me throughout. Shout out to Devansh, the luckiest person I have met in debating circuit and has been my constant and best teammate. Just shout out to all my friends and Shivaji Devsog as a whole. Yeah. With me on panel I have.
Hi Aaryav, all the best. Please check your eyes.
Devansh panel, all the best.
Keshav.
Suryansh, all the best.
Hi Tarushi, all the best.
Vinny, all the best. Also, just a couple of shout outs from my end as well. Firstly, to Rutvi, I think she's incredibly good debater and she should have been here. And also to Mohit, because I think there are very few people who are interested in training juniors. But like also lastly, Hansraj Society, Hansraj Devsog as at large, because it really does not have that good future that it used to have a couple of years back, and I really hope that it some sort of ignites it back. And lastly, and I think this is the most important thing, look at the finals, look at finals 3 years back. There are new teams from our batch. And this is the that it can happen. So please, all the seniors should actively work something for the juniors as well to make sure that after a year, all 4 teams come from new batches. So yeah, all the best.
I think we're all aware. I think we're all aware about general housekeeping rules. POIs are highly encouraged and they help us in close calls. With that, PM, whenever you're ready, here.
I would require one phone to self-time myself. Can anyone from the OC? Yeah.
Hello, am I perfectly audible?
Hello, am I perfectly audible? Is this fine if I speak like this, judges? Yeah, before I start, I have a few shout outs. First is to my teammate Robin. I always wanted to team up with Robin. It's always amazing to team up with Robin. Shout out to all. Huh? Yeah.
Hello, okay, fine. Other shout-outs would involve other seniors such as Krisham, Keshav, Ayush, Lavanya, all are amazing seniors. Shout out to my DDOC Depstock. Please debate. I'm not a part of this Depstock anymore. Please debate, guys. Come on. Okay, and also shout out to all the other teams, all the judges. Good, amazing, calm. Shout out to OC as well.
Is this better?
I think this is
I would prefer if the judges hear me than specs. Yeah, okay. No shades. Okay. Starting my speech. Oops. Yeah. Starting my speech in 3, 2. Life is the most precious gift which human beings possesses. This movement advocates for ability to desire, to experience, and this is what we want to support at all points of time. 2 claims that opening government will win on. The first is why US is going through an aging crisis. Even if you think this is unintuitive, this is factually true, I'll prove it. But second is why having more moral agents, more human beings in this life is just a moral good. The first thing is why US is going through an aging crisis, or in the future would go through it. I know it's unintuitive, you have only heard Japan, but this is also true for US. The reason for this is, the empirical reason for this is the fertility rate which you require in order to have a population which is over progressing is 2.1. The current rate of fertility in US is 1.9. So even if they are not going through an aging crisis right now, in few of the years they'll go through aging crisis, and this is a problem statement. But I'll give you structural reason why this is true. The number one reason is because of the fact that people think that having a kid is a burden at all points of time because of the extreme liberal ideologies which US citizens have, because they think that having an individual curtails my agency and ability to experience life in the fullest manner. This is the reason why most of the Americans think that having a children is just a burden. But there are other things as well which would incorporate the opportunity cost in order to have a children, which could be emotional, time and efforts, which oftentimes most of the individuals don't want to put. The implication of this is that if in near future or in some future there would be a shortage of individuals who are in working force. The problem with this is that US is turning into a manufacturing sector and US is turning into isolist economy. And the reason for this is because because of the inculcation of the pro-nationalistic tendencies of politics which is happening in US. So the inculcation of this ideology, which is promoting isolation economy, is so strong that even if Trump is not in power in future, this inculcation is enough to like make people believe that isolation economy is the best way to go about it, because this is what they hear from all points of time. But economical policies such as EU, like they signing deals with European Union, is also pumping a lot of money into US specifically. They just signed a deal with European Union, sanctioning them $600 billion of investment in US, which is specifically targeted towards domestic sector, domestic industries, and domestic production in this US specifically. The implication of all this is that the burden on older people would increase over time if you don't have more number of people coming in inside, like having inside of the US. Which would mean that there would be less output in the sectors, less production, and less wages, and less ability for people to have disposable income. But they might say that we will just have people from other countries coming in US, and this would solve the problem. There are few preemptions for this. The first preemption is that obviously there's a negative sentiment towards this Indian people from vast amount of people, and you have structural policies against them, such as H-1B visas and other kind of things, which restricts capacity problem for other individuals to come in. The second problem is that these are extremely expensive to have these individuals inside of the country, because you need to pay them salaries, you need to give them reallocation costs, and other expenditures which also these people end up taking. The third is a flip. If you have more people coming in, they don't contribute to, they take more away from your country. And the reason for this is that US is the biggest, is amongst the top countries where remittances flow outside of that country. And this is the fact that even if you have more people coming in and contributing inside of your economy, more money goes out of the economy as compared to what is coming in. As a consequence of this, is if they want to argue that you will have more people from outside, I've flipped it by proving that if you have more people coming in your economy, it will just harm the economy even further. But last is just a principal obligation which the state has towards US citizens over other individuals who are not part of the state. And the reason for this is because state takes autonomy of individuals via like restricting their mobility and other functionality as a person. So obviously you need to give them something in return. You cannot give these opportunities to people who are coming from outside of the country as opposed to people who are already there. This movement gives the solution by encouraging people to have children, which solve this problem statement which I am able to frame in the top of my speech. Two reasons. The first reason is that you pedestalize the utility which is derived from having an offspring through narratives such as legacy, such as support system, and if you don't have a children, you would be lonely in eternity of your life. The way these movements function is they target your phone, which is the most proximate device to you, which shapes your beliefs, which shapes your ability to think, which shapes your actions at all points of time. Algorithm traps you to believe that having an offspring is a good thing altogether, because this is something which you engage with on a daily basis, on a very frequent basis. So movements oftentimes just don't go and do rallies, but also oftentimes utilize digital space in order to shape people's opinion. The second reason is that this also influences government policies, because if you have a strong movement, government also need to create some policies in order to cater to this big voter bloc or the people who would be influenced by this movement, who oftentimes act as a swing voter, and swing states are the most important states within USA which actually determine elections at all point of time. As a consequence of which, politicians also have an incentive to listen to what this movement is saying, because not only the people who are inside of this movement actually are voters, but people who are also influenced by this movement are also voters who are tipping point voters. As a consequence of this, you are able to also have government policies which looks like having tax breaks for individuals who are having to have offspring. You're obviously also able to have policies such as maternity leave for women in pregnancy periods and things like that. So all of the problems and restraints which the people are feeling right now would be solved as a consequence of this movement actually doing very good. What is the weighing of all this? Before I start this short,
Is USA getting more progressive?
is USA so it's ambiguous, like USA could be, USA could not be. I think Rob will deal with it. Okay. The weighing of this argument is simple. The first thing is that preemptive action of having more children in the economy is required to protect a very big harm of economy failing, which is an irreversible harm. So if you don't just do this preemptive action of encouraging people to have children, once the tipping point is reached that you can not have children anymore, whatever actions you can take is something which you would not be able to meet with the economy's demand. This is something which is happening in Japan and other countries. The second thing is that economy is the most core part of the society, because it dictates every single action. It dictates every single action which you are doing. Your ability to buy goods and services, your ability to make choices. Everything is dependent on you having money, because you all live in a capitalistic bubble. The second argument is simply to have more life because it's a moral code. The first reason for this is that obviously there are various joys which exist in this life. In terms of relationship, in terms of your ability to achieve goals, in terms of winning people's speech. All these kind of things exist for an individual that give them utility and experience, like gives them happiness. They could say, but these individuals never consented to be born. The problem is that you also cannot give consent to not be born. And that's the problem. That if you can give, like, there is no meaningful way or there's no structural way to identify the preference of an individual who is not born at the very first place. So it's not something which you can take as a rebuttal. The second thing is that the right to life or right to having a being in this society is at most pedestalized in every single thing. In constitutions and every single thing. The founding principle is you need to have life in order to have utility, in order to have principles, in order to have rights at all points of time. So if you value life, this is something which you should value, this is something which you should support. For also reason, proud to propose.
For the very fine speech, inviting hello whenever you're ready.
Is this audible or is this not? It's not working. Are you gonna turn this on? Button on.
Hello, hello. Yes, Mr. Aniket. Okay. I think this creates echo.
Okay, without the mic. Hi everyone, Rudraksh going as hello. But before that, few shout outs. First shout out to our mom and dad, Sej and Dhruv, for teaching us and making us able to break open here and reach the finals. We were last time novice reserve break, so it's a big time for us. Second shout out to Pragyansh because only he and I know what it takes to be here and for the last 2 years crushing our ass. And yep, that's special shout out to Mohit Hooda, Atyab Ahmed, Priyansh Agarwala. These are my friends in DevSoc, these are my friends in the circuit, and I come often every weekend because I want to see you all there. So yeah. The first claim on why Robin loses this debate. Why will people listen to this narrative? Firstly, on entry barrier. They themselves claim people do not have finances. They themselves claim the political institutions make exclusionary policies. So why would people even opt in and have more kids when they do not have the finances for it or the political incentives from the government to support it? The second thing is the plausibility barrier. The first thing is why will government even listen and change these policies? The second thing is why will the people listen and opt into these policies? And the third claim is even bigger. Why do they think the immigration cannot solve the problem and only the white people will listen to this problem and only the white people will have kids? All of this takes opening of government out of this debate. Moving on to my case then. Firstly, the problem in status quo. The American dream is a disastrous proposition. The most powerful nation and ever since the war, it has resources, it has military, it has technology, the supposed dream of equality of liberation. Why? Because the liberation from your home nations in a world perceptually better than theirs. I think A, the reality is different. The United States is a collaboration of criminals, racists, bigots, criminals, who are powered by the population rhetoric of MAGA, Make America Great Again. This has three implications. The US native population should rise in power. And by native, I do not mean black. I mean the white supremacist population should rise in power. The two, they should rise in power because they want to reclaim their resources that dictate everyone's life, which Vishesh claims in this scenario. What are these resources and why does everyone want it? But most importantly, the white people. These are jobs. And since I'm not too keen on criminalizing myself, I do not want to add the results of the terms which they use for themselves and the people who come from different backgrounds and communities. If you see the Brazil bid, you know what these people call us. You know what these people, immigrants, call them. But secondly, if you did not see that, you have seen Reddit, Twitter forums. You have seen CNN and Piers Morgan calling out these people and what these terms are. I do not want to say those terms, but these are about Middle Eastern people, the Indians, the Afghanis, and most importantly, the black people from their own community. I think secondly, what do they want in this scenario? They want state benefits. State benefits that they believe that the immigrants have taken away from them. Immigrants have taken away from them because of the green card. Green card that allows them to earn here. green card that allows him to have a house there and send money back home, which is what Vishesh tells you. So the narrative which these white people believe is the idea that these people come in on our land, occupy our spaces, take our money away, and they leave us shackled in shambles. This is really, really important. Why? Because white people believe that they have an inherent right over this property. They have an inherent right over these resources. And this violates their principal integrity of the controlling or having their nation. Why is this a birthright in this scenario, and why do people believe this mindset? One, on skin superiority. Colonization for the last 300 years have made me believe that my brown skin is inferior to every white skin here, and this is why I feel inferior. But secondly, cosmetics and media around us are accustomed to white people. This is literally absurd claim, but this is true. Cameras were invented to adjust to white skin. This is why a lot of black people can never be seen in the black-white footage film in the past decades. But also, this is why, because every media around us, every society around us treats white people as superior. I think secondly, it's a geographical birthright. Why do you and I feel that our home is our home and someone else's isn't? It's because we took birth there. We grew up there. Every day, like we trash talk and etc., we come back to our home, to our parents. We believe we live here. This is why the right is to us. This is my home and not yours. But secondly, more importantly, we attach the sentiment of our identity to our home. This is exactly what the white people believe in this scenario. At the end of the day, the bottom line becomes white people feel that they have this inherent right over their property, over their land and resources. But the implication becomes it gets stronger. It gets stronger every time Vishesh's framing is bought in this debate. Why? Because of political rhetoric. Trump tells you and is funded by people like Elon Musk, Bill Gates, Zuckerberg. You all have seen that clip where these all people are sitting on a table and discussing the progress of America. And Bezos. How does this impact in this debate? These people make the platform they operate and the businesses they operate more suffocating. It happens in three scenarios. Elon Musk made X a free speech platform. It's good on hindsight, but the implication then becomes people who are black, people who are immigrants, people who are Jewish, anti-Semitism rises against them. Jewish hate is on rise, hate against Muslims on the right, and Elon Musk justifies that, oh, it is free speech, people can do anything and anything they want. Second thing is that, to make it worse, Bill Gates and Jeff Bezos have literally, killed the jobs of thousands of people. This has literally happened in two. The problem then becomes they laid off people who were black, who were marginalized, who were Muslims, who were immigrants. And this is not a few numbers, these are numbers in thousands. The problem then becomes, statistically this is true, and I beg you to check your Google, right? 69% of the people laid out in US in the last 4 years were these immigrants, were these black people who were discriminated against. Only the white retains. The problem then becomes, and thirdly, more importantly, right, if you see algorithms like Zuckerberg's Facebook, etc., all of these algorithms are propagating white supremacy. You see white media more often, you see white influencers more often. People who get banned, people who get discriminated against the algorithm are the people who are black, who come from colored skin. This is why people use slurs against them online and you do not get banned. But once you call someone white a slur, these people, these comments get disappearing. These comments gets banned. This whole algorithm and whole setup is a facade against the racism which US wants to hide in the plain sight. This is also called out by OpenAI, the ChatGPT organization, right? Why? Because they're Israeli, they are Jewish. They have implemented specific mechanisms that US cannot no longer hate on these people because you cannot have Jewish hate in the platform. If you try to do that, it gets censored. Before that, CG.
What does all of this prove in the round for pro-natalist movement?
If you had waited 10 seconds, you would have got the answer. The bottom line then becomes, if white people feel that their resources are being snatched, if white people feel they have this inherent right over these resources, and if white people feel that if they have kids, they can reclaim these resources, the problem then becomes, and this is the tipping point in this debate, who actually gets impacted by this narrative and this movement? Because the opening government never answers. Generally, the association with Middle Eastern people, the black people, the people who come from the countries of immigrants like Pakistan and India, is that they are family-oriented people. They like to have more kids. Why do white people not like to have kids? By their own framing. But secondly, white people are seen themselves in the society as sophisticated. They are knowledgeable. They have more financial planning. They have child planning, which means the impact of this movement, of this narrative, is going to be uneven. White people will not have the incentive because they're financially educated. They believe in a sophisticated society. They would not want to have kids. But these immigrants would want to have kids. And even if this does not happen, the very fact this narrative exists is a harm to these white people, because they would believe that these immigrants, these people who are claiming and snatching their resources, are going to have more kids. This is where the framing of crackdowns unlock. When these people, they have more population, white people feel even more scarier. They feel even more angrier that their resources are going to be snatched. Their claims are going to be overridden. This is why police brutality happens on black people. This is why institutional crackdowns happen on black settlements and black lobbies and black neighborhoods. This is why Indians and Pakistanis feel hesitant to open up businesses in that chain because white people are discriminating against them. Which means at the end of the day, opening opposition wins this round.
I thank the Yellow for the very fine speech, inviting DPM whenever you're ready.
Can I also have some water? Yes. Wait, I want a phone for timer. Like, what is this? Is this recording? Whose phone is this?
It's an audio recording.
Okay, sorry. Can I get a phone? Can I get my phone only? Like, I'm not going to use the internet while speaking. Come on.
Hi, I'm audible. Hello, I'm audible. Which is better, mic or without mic?
Okay, yeah. I'm loud enough. So, a couple of shout outs. So, People Speak has really been a special comp. Back in 2023, Lavan and I made finals. We did not win, but we were so happy with our performance and like we just loved it so much that like it was just too fun just doing that motion. And like it has just been a very nice comp always. And the second shout out to Vishesh, he has been an amazing teammate. I don't know why he's so underrated, he's actually too smart. And other shout out to DDUC, Krishang and all others. And Mysore also. Okay. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. The question that whether life is good or bad has literally been one of the most important questions of life. Our claim is going to be that regardless of it being good or bad, life is a net good and must be prioritized. Any attempts to promote that life should be there is very meaningful. Let's respond to Tim Puljak's famous mechanism about life is destroyed or net. Mechanism 1. Most people are ingrained to believe that life needs to be good. This means you always try to rationalize your negative experiences and try to find the silver lining in small things. Negative experiences never outweigh positive experiences because even if somebody will have 11 losses, that one finals win is something which you can always be proud of because my mom taught me that you can always look at the positive and you can always ignore the negative. But secondly, when life turns hard, you have a lot of things to fall back on. That one friend, that motivational reel which literally asks you to work on yourself, that one comment which literally helped you build yourself. When a friend tells you that I'm always going to be there, when a girlfriend tells you I love you, these are the most important things in your life. But third of all, the cognizance of attention towards mental health has also increased significantly post-COVID. This means this has also led to good parenting practices. This has literally led to a wave of people realizing why mental health is important and lots of people actually engaging in mental health practices in schools. It led to the counselors existing in schools, which means that these mechanisms have been designed to make life actually good. But fourthly, most importantly, Op can argue that life can be bad also, and they're absolutely right. I think the point of life is not just to be happy. It is to experience. It is to feel the pain. It is to feel the happiness. Things like death, things like a breakup are also super valuable things in life because life is not about happiness. It is about a journey. It is about a journey which may be good, which may be bad, but it is still a journey. To have a shot at life, to have the shot to experience love, to have the experience of your parents saying I love you trumps everything. These are the most important things in life which can only be experienced if you have a life and life becomes the precursor of that, right? We don't think that there exists any particular person who never gets an opportunity or never gets any good experience at all. We think just having that experience is a net good, right? And of the competitive is non-existence, which is worse primarily because you have no ability to actualize any utility at all, be it positive, be it negative. The conclusion of this framing is that since this is a morally good thing, they have an obligation towards pass this on. Why? A, we were given this opportunity to life and we have an obligation to continue this gives benefit, right? Morally speaking, it is a net good. But secondly, we are the only ones who have the capacity to do this, right? Which means the onus obviously falls into us, right? To experience life is the most meaningful thing in life, right? And that must be prioritized. Why is this the most important thing in this round? Even more important than all the pragmatic arguments that you heard from Vishesh also. Because we must try and give people a shot at life, because even if life is hard, we think the experience of hardness is also meaningful, primarily because you are experiencing something which a lot of things wouldn't be able to experience. You know what is the statistical probability of actually being born? Because there are so many sperms out there, it's literally 1 in trillions. It is that rare to actually have a life. So we think having a life is a priori good, regardless of radicalism, regardless of Trump, regardless of minority oppression. That is why even if people go through negative experiences, they don't choose suicide because they believe my life will get better. We think just the idea of hope, the idea that you have in your mind that I am living a life, I am experiencing, that I will live, this in and of itself is valuable, and we don't care about it being good or bad to begin with. But secondly, even if a lot of people have negative experiences, on scale we just win, because most people in the USA just do have good lives to begin with, right? Extension 1, we have already bring this. Extension 2, let's run the extension with Sharon and an answer. Why having a family and kids is one of the most important things in this round, and why it makes your life better. Mechanism 1, the joy of experiencing someone who looks like you, talks like you, to see them grow is literally immense. When you see a little child, the joy of teaching your kid how to cycle, how to walk, trumps everything. The joy to go to a graduation ceremony of your kid trumps everything. When I will have my kid, I will do Stephen's pro-am and fucking win it with him. That will give me so much joy to begin with, right? Oftentimes when life kicks you, you turn towards your family. Your family is always there for you, primarily because the society has taught us that a family stays together and sticks together. It is your family who will always be there for you. Your friends could be bitches, girls could be bitches, boys could be bitches, everybody could be a bitch, but the person who wouldn't be bitch would be your family, and therefore family is actually meaningful, right? The joy to see those little hands of your daughter and then to see your daughter grown up into an adult is something which we want more and more people to experience, and having a family is the most important thing in this round. Lastly, people don't have kids because they think it is going to be expensive. Ask a parent. No parent cares about it being expensive, because they would love to give all their finances to their kid. They would literally give all the money to make sure that the kid goes to a good school. Literally buy all the PlayStations because you want to give that money to them. It is something which comes internally, which means oftentimes the initial things that you have are very short-termist, are based on capitalist narratives. But once you become a parent, once you have a family, you don't think about all those things, and you think it as a positive thing to begin with, right? This also means that oftentimes it is just actually it makes you happy. Or can't say abusive parents, because it is too much in minorities. It's literally 2 to 3% of the population. Most people love their child because of biology, narratives, blood relation and whatnot. The comparative is that these people become lonely in the future. They have no one to turn to. They have no one to take care of them when they grow old. They have no one to actually tell them I will take care of you. Now to this, Op might say, but most parents neglect their child. The first thing to explain is that even in a worst case where children neglect their child, even if they come and meet them once in a month, the amount of happiness which parents feel is immense. The fact that my son actually came to me, they often tell their co-workers, they tell their neighbors that my son literally won a debate competition, my son literally got a job. Even if they're distant children, we think it still gives utility to parents because they rationalize that, right? We think just having kids is actually negative. The weighing of this argument is that this is the most approximate impact in this round, primarily because it is your family who will always stay with you, and having more families will actually make lives of people much better. Side opposition makes these people into a life of misery, into a life of sadness, and to die alone, we think we don't want that to begin with. Right?
Is dying by suicide morally illegitimate?
It is morally illegitimate. Let's go on. Alright, yeah. So let's talk about opening opposition now. First thing opening opposition says is, why will people listen? First mechanism. Oftentimes we can use religious connotations. Why having kids? Why you should have kids? Most people are religious. 95% people are religious in the world. So we can target people based on their identity. Secondly, governments also want this, by the way, because governments also care about economic impact. Vishesh tells you that oftentimes once you reach the inflection point, then it is impossible to reverse the aging population, which means that governments actually incentive to act now. But thirdly, a lot of our arguments are actually independent of people listening. Our point is that morally, an attempt to convince people that life is good is a moral attempt. An attempt to tell people that you should have kids is in and of itself good. This means even if most people are not able to agree, we think just an attempt has value. But even if some people have, that is a moral good, and we must prioritize that. But lastly, opening up point about discrimination. Number one, less people can also discriminate because Asia is bigger than USA. USA was still able to discriminate. So even if you have less white-skinned people, they can still discriminate. But secondly, by the way, Rudraksh, a lot of racial minorities are also super discriminatory, right? Like discrimination on caste. We think a lot of them Asians also discriminate against other Asians. So it's unclear why any discrimination is likely going to change at all. But third of all, even if white people are fuckers, they have a shot at life. They should still live, right? Even if you're making lives of other people, that does not mean that you can be condemned to not having a life in the very first place. We think that life is a net good to begin with. Lastly, we don't know if US is going to be liberal tomorrow or is going to be regressive tomorrow. Earlier people used to think it will be always liberal. Now people think it will always regress. The point is that life is a net good, family is a net good, and those are the things, these are the most important things in life. We think opening government is winning this debate. Here. Thank you.
And I'm the teacher secretary. Please inviting DLO whenever you're ready.
Is this for recording or time? Started over. Hi, audible till the back? Perfect. I'll do shoutouts in the end. Pragyansh going DLO. Let's first impact on Rudraksh's framing. Who even opts into the pro-natalist movement at all points of time? These are not the rich and white people of the US. Why? Because they have three specific reasons for this. Number one, they have education, which means their aspirations differ than having a baby and extending their identity through that, which means they want to have other aspirations, probably getting a better job or doing other things. So they're off clash right from the start of the debate. Number two, they don't feel an active threat to their identity at all points of time because these are the people who are already established within the United States, and they're white people who already enjoy some sort of freedom, some sort of access, which are higher than the amount of people who are discriminated at all points of time, which means these are not the people who are impacted by the pro-natalist movement at all points of time. But number three, they also have higher access to financial literacy by the very virtue of them having access to education, which means they already know that having kids is a financial burden which has occurred onto them, which means they don't want to have kids despite of this movement occurring. They don't prove to you why just a movement existing or supporting a movement translates into people opting into that movement in the first place. There's a disconnect in their case. Why are migrants or immigrants or minorities the only people who go ahead and opt into this movement in the first place? And I'll concede to the analysis and use that to beat the shit out of them. Why? Because when you don't have money generationally, you don't believe you can earn money as well because you've never seen that access at all points of time. You want to be seen and recognized. This is the specific reason why people who don't have anything in India also go ahead and resort back to their identity in the form of religion, in the form of caste, in the form of class, etc. Which means the specific people who do go ahead and opt into this circumstance is people who don't have anything at all in terms of money, finances, etc. And these are most likely immigrants who go ahead and opt into these ideologies at all points of time. This is also what minorities do, and this supersedes any sort of rational expectation that there is, because they don't agree or they can't believe that they can go ahead and earn money in the near future. They can't go ahead and believe that anything else would go ahead and see any sort of visibility. The only thing that they care about is visibility, and for others to go ahead and see them. The only point that others see them is when they go ahead and reproduce at all points of time, which is why minorities disproportionately opt into this movement. Why is this harmful? The perception which it has in the terms of policy implications and in all terms of hatred, etc., that they go ahead and take away our jobs, that they go ahead and take away opportunities from us, is so large that the scale of damage which is done onto the minds of these white people is massively large in their side of the world. This extends the Rudraksh's frame and explains the need metric as to why this is specifically very, very harmful towards minorities and exasperates the hate magnanimously on their side of the world. What are the impacts of this heightened hatred, and why are they so important? Number one, this is loss of access to future opportunities for migrants who want to come in, and also the people who are currently reliant on this. I'll take both of them later. Note one, even currently, look this up, I didn't have access to Google, you do. It takes like 100 years for you to even get citizenship access within the United States, even if you're not born there. Like if you're born there, you of course get citizenship access there. What are the policy implications here? Governments don't want companies to go ahead and hire people who are immigrants or people of color because they are not white, and the current perception of the conservative population in the United States is that you don't want to hire these people because they will take away our jobs, and this is an opportunity cost that governments don't want to bear. Plus Trump is fucking racist, right? So he does want all of these people to go ahead and hire them. Impact is that you take away the opportunity from people who are already existing. So if you're laid off, you're not able to go ahead and get another job. If you're in a job, you're laid off, which means you don't have any access to life either. But number two, this also disincentivizes newer immigrants from coming in, because if from their framing, religious people and everyone else wants to procreate babies, they realize even when they go ahead and opt into this circumstance or within the United States and chase the American dream, they will not be able to have a baby because the government doesn't allow that at all points of time, because these babies won't have a good life at all points of time. Why? And this is very true, right? The land capacity within the United States is very, very limited. They can host only a certain number of people. If you go ahead and disrupt that land capacity and the economic resource per use, it is at this specific point of time where you do away with this. Why is people chasing the American dream so important? And Robin is off trash and pre-argumentative here, by the way, right? Number one, pro-natalist movement forces people, not only people, imposes a restriction for people to go ahead and fundamentally move from one place to another. But not only this, you also restrict people who are specific immigrants to go ahead and restrict immigration, right? So why is this fundamentally wrong? And why is this the most important thing? Number one, and this is the principle which is standing in this debate, by the way, right? Right from Genesis, people have moved from one place to another in access of opportunities, in access of resources to uplift their life at all points of time. They go ahead and search better access to the livelihoods at all points of time. The state imposes a restriction on this access by the very virtue of being a state. What happens in their side of the world is, not only is this restriction already present, but they go ahead and disproportionately impact the people who are already disadvantaged. Because who even wants to move from one state, right? Presumably the richer people will already have access to good life in their home states. But people or immigrants or asylum seekers who move from a shitty state of life who go ahead and chase the American dream, these are the specific people who are impacted in their side of the world disproportionately. This forces immigrants to not go ahead and come and chase the American dreams, but also takes away opportunities from them at all points of time. This also beats like Vishesh's principle because it's contingent on the outcomes of someone who's not even born. We are saying that agency existed and you're imposing a restriction on the already existing agency which is present with most individuals in their side of the world. So this claim is something which stands because it's more certain. You can never impact on how life pans out for these individuals or not, and they're pre-argumentative when they go ahead and say that they can't do it. Closing.
Is pro-natalism movement the tipping point for people to have more kids? Is the question that top half never answers.
Answer that in your speech. I'll move to the positive comparative on our side of the world then. No, I won't take. What are the implications of the pro-natalist movement not existing, or why we go ahead and oppose it? Number one, it gives people an opportunity to reinvigorate their identity. Why? One, there is efficiency per resource which is required in order to cater to a specific population. The efficacy per resource increases in our side of the world when you don't have a massive big population opting into this, right? Why is this true? Because absent this narrative, black people and people of color are forced to see other things other than having more babies as an extension of their identity. They see that they can go ahead and work jobs as an extension of their identity at all points of time and uplift their lives to go ahead and have some sort of presence. They don't feel the need for visibility to occur. But number two, when you go ahead and lessen the number of people who are evidently born, because the pro-natalist movement doesn't exist, and probably these people don't opt into having more children as an extension of identity, you open up more capacity because land is limited, but there are lesser number of immigrants who are present, or lesser number of babies who are procreating, which means policy makers realize that these are not an active threat which are perceived to our identities, because now they realize that they won't procreate in larger numbers and take away opportunities from us at all points of time. This is the tipping point at which you're able to create more opportunities from these people and are also able to guarantee these people life of dignity. If their claim on the tipping point is dignity at all points of time, we think we're able to guarantee that on our side of the world much better, because we open up capacity, we've proven incentive, tangibly opposition. Also, wait, do I start recording again for shoutouts? I'll do it anyways. So, couple of shoutouts. First to Rudraksh, obviously. I said at Axiom last year that I'll do the next finals with him. It took me 1 year to do the next finals, but we're doing the next finals. Second, of course, to SBS Depstock, which also reminds me, and he missed it. SBS BPD is happening next week, so please come there.
Yes!
We'd love to host you all. And third, and most importantly, to, of course, Dhruv, who's here supporting us, has been there throughout. And finally, to debate that session.
With that, I thank the DLO for the verified speech, inviting member of Gov whenever you're ready.
Let's go, Suhail. No sheets.
Last part is just to prepare.
Yes, please. Thank you.
I'll definitely do like that. I'll definitely do slightly
Is this audible to everyone? Firstly, judges and teams can hear me, right? Okay, hopefully the spectators can. Okay, firstly, quick shout out firstly to Ayushman. Yeah, second to KMC Depsa. I won't keep them too long because I don't have a sheet, so I might forget. Okay. The problem with top half in this debate is that they assume that the anti-natalist movement is some magical thing that you do. And all of a sudden now all of them want to have children, and in the absence of this no one wants to have children. The first thing we'll explain at closing government is who exactly spreads this movement, what it actually looks like, and why is it even persuasive, and to who is it even persuasive in the first place. The first thing we'll explain is who exactly is being targeted by the movement. Why do, in most instances, we think you target specific groups of people and probably set certain standards in terms of who has the capacity to have children in the first place. What we mean by this is that it's probably very unintuitive for people to support a movement that encourages every single person in the world to have children. The reason for that is that there's many people in the world who are like poor, who don't have capacity to even feed themselves, which means people probably don't like supporting a movement that advocates them to have 10 children and things like that. That's literally like the problem in rural India at all points of time, right? The problem is that not everyone has heard Robin's speech, which is why they don't know why life is inherent. Which is why at that point of time they assume that these children will have a very bad life if they're born to parents who don't have the capacity to support them in the first place. Insofar as that is the case, we think the people who spread this movement, who obviously have the incentive to maximize the number of people they reach to, don't want to go ahead and advocate this to people who they think that will lead to less support for their movement. Which means the way that they probably will do it is they'll probably talk about or target people who they believe have capacity to do it. Which means if you earn this much money, if you live in a neighborhood that has these facilities, it's probably a good idea for you to have a child and things like that. This is exactly what the movement advocates for, because which means that it targets people, sets out probably standards that they believe are possible for you to like have a child, and then targets those people and encourages them to have children. So the first exclusive framing at closing government is just explaining who exactly is targeted by the movement and who exactly do they advocate this to at all points of time. The second thing then is what is the exact benefit of you going ahead and doing this and advocating it to specific people. The first thing is that the way you probably do this is, like I said, you go ahead and explore standards that are probably necessary for people to go ahead and now have children. The problem in the status quo is that most people have a bias against having children, which is this, like I guess if OG says that America has an aging population, that's probably true, right? So at that point, the reason this exists is because there's a cognitive bias against having children. So there's probably narratives that tell you that raising a child is very costly. There's a lot of things associated with it. So if you lose a lot of your life, etc., etc. But also even if you don't actually do any research yourself, when you see people around you not having children, or your friends, etc., saying that they don't want children, it encourages you also to not do these kind of things, which means even in the absence of proper information, you go ahead and take these kind of decisions without actually understanding, because you just assume that this is something that's very taxing and you don't have capacity to do. The way the movement then comes in is that it's probably able to go ahead and the way it'll probably do is that it's probably going to conduct research, etc., into explaining the kind of standards that you need to meet to probably be able to raise a child, which means they'll probably go ahead and do research. They'll probably go ahead and look into various factors that can be included to determine whether or not you should have a child or not. The way this then changes that when they go ahead and talk about these particular things, it now gives more information to people about the kind of things, about whether or not they are fit to have a child or not. What this achieves then is that now people aren't just restricted to the cognitive bias they have or the bias against having children, which means that at the point of which you have more information on what standards are, you're able to see better whether you meet them or not, and probably have a higher chance of opting into having children. This alone as a contribution from CG is important because it unlocks all of opening government's benefits. Because if opening government gives you a bunch of benefits in Vishesh's speech in terms of how having more children is a good thing, closing government unlocks the like mechanism to which how people actually have more children, where we explain how this probably works and who exactly is having more children, which means this alone is a contribution like you credit to CG over OG. The second thing then is that there's more like research, and as a result of that, policy at all points of time is like a lot more targeted. The first thing to explain here is that the point at which people like there's research against these kind of things, or probably explaining why these kind like you shouldn't have a child, etc. It then leads to clash between these two movements. So for example, the anti-natalist movement and the pro-natalist movement probably clash to explain what the kind of like what the standards should be about whether you should have a child or not, and things like that. Which means on net, because of these kind of disagreements and these kind of check mechanisms that both movements place onto each other, there's more information available in terms of whether something is a fit mechanism to have children or not. Which means there's more research then in terms of what kind of neighborhoods are probably good to have children, what kind of like school systems are probably better to have children, what kind of savings you should have to have a child, what kind of like salary you should have to have a child. We think these kind of clashes between these two movements that advocate for different things becomes a competing mechanism to there be more thinking about this and more research into this, because both movements probably have an incentive to hire experts, conduct more research into explaining why they're more right at all points of time. Which means the conclusion of all of this is that there's more information, and both competing movements contribute to each other having more information about these kind of things. Before I explain how this specifically impacts policy, I'll take off.
So this assumes that movements doing more research and developing more capacities is also well received by the public. The public's capacity to receive.
No, so obviously the capacity to receive the information is that when the information exists, you go ahead and consume it. On your side, when you don't, if like in the absence of the pro-natalist movement, this information never actually comes up in the first place, which means there's never actually an incentive to research on your side. Because if on your side there's an echo chamber of people only advocating for having children or for not having children, you never have the incentive to go ahead and research and think about whether you should have a child or not. Which means it's only on our side when these movements actually come about that there's a greater incentive to actually research about this and probably think about whether this is a good decision or not at the end of the day. The conclusion of all of this then is that on our finally, then how does this impact policy? We think on our side now, when you go in and advocate for policy, you just have better like implementation of what actually should be the standards that should be met to probably raise a child. Which means now the kind of characteristics that you look into when probably making neighborhoods, etc., to make it more friendly to people having children, is when you like now you have more information about probably what kind of facilities should be available and what kind of like things should exist, right? Which means it's only at the point at which the pro-natalist movement actually rises that specific people are targeted by it. You have more information about your capacity to have a child. The implication of this then is this happens both ways. First, people who don't have children as a result of the bias now have an incentive to have it, but second, people who have children and as a result of that like can't afford to keep up with like the like expenses of raising a child, or probably have to like take more loans, etc., and this just impacts the life of the child to a large extent as well. At that point of time, it's easier for these people to also take a decision because there's just more information available about whether or not this is something that you should do or not. Because we explained that we're the only team that till now that has actually explained the capacity of this movement, even if our impact may be smaller than top half, it's still the most certain impact in this debate. For all those
Inviting member of OB whenever you are ready. Here.
Does someone have water? That is fine. Exams going all the way back? Yeah. Perfect. Before I give shout outs, please don't talk. If you want to talk, there are ample seats behind you. It has been very tough to track this debate till now. So please just talk slowly. Shout out to my teammate Rushdoon, and shout out to Prabhu Narang. We did this last year. Shout out to Angad Bhaiya. Prabhu gave the shout last year. And shout out to Dash, wherever he is. Try speech. Oh, panel ready? Dhruv, sorry, restarting, but Dhruv is this one.
Dhruv will agree, being a mother is extremely hard, and that is the only thing we want to run on extension. First and foremost, what exactly is movement likely to look like? Because CG somehow gives reasons but does not explain why all of the members of the movement itself want to go for research and other such things. Because obviously it is far more draining to do that as opposed to just go for and push the narrative. First, there are likely to be politicians who want to use the conservative lobby to constantly go and raise the anti-immigrant wave, that these are the people who are taking away your jobs. These are the people who look far different to you, and these are the people who are also culturally different to you. Note this also extends why O frame is wrong, because the purpose of the movement is the white person having the kid and pushing them out, which they themselves say, which means that case is just a non-starter and they should not be considered, therefore. Second, there's religious revival going on due to religion itself pushes this narrative and constantly explains how having a family or how having a child is something that connects you to God. By virtue which oftentimes there are different groups that are present who want to push for it faster or want to push for it in an easier or more convenient fashion as opposed to do multiple levels of research and other such things. This ends up explaining that the movement uses narratives or rhetorics that are anti-immigrant or uses narratives that are pushing for white people to have more children. But I think everyone is correct. White people who are educated probably don't want to have it. They know all of these things. Who are the white people then that are affected? First, there has been an increasing trend towards more and more white individuals who want to enter into a blue-collar market. This is because first, universities are getting expensive, due to which you just don't have the money to go and enter. Second, the debt crisis is already foreseen in the past and it has set a precedence, due to which multiple people just feel it's fine if I go and work in this kind of space, as opposed to wanting to work in a big corporate after going to a university. But third, you also cannot just visualize the return that you will get if you enter the university in the first place, which means the people that this motion affects the most naturally end up becoming these white individuals who are maybe the working class, who are maybe the lower middle class, or individuals who are actually going to get affected by this. This also actually proves often that no one has done till now. What is the implication of this? First, the manipulation happens in a bad way and happens to a particular group who are already not as comfortable with dealing with this. But second, there are obvious ancillary harms that come out of this. First extension then, why is motherhood just a bad thing for these kind of people? First, the process itself is highly problematic. Your bodily changes take place and affect you constantly, which is why you don't even feel nice about yourself. There are things such as postpartum depression, there are things such as the cycle itself being problematic, or there's other things, other side effects that you often get due to medicines or due to the process itself. Second, medical trips are incredibly exhaustive, due to which oftentimes you have to go forward and just feel the harm more and more on your own body. And this only happens when the pro-natalist movement is able to expand its reach, which it is doing right now. And this is also why the POI to OG is important. America is getting more conservative. Trump is winning more. He won the last midterms. Third, you have to put your life on hold because you literally have to leave your job. You obviously cannot work. But this does not restrict yourself to just the point at which you are having the child or you are still pregnant. This often extends to the first 2-3 years of the child's life, because childcare is important. If the narrative is made in the way that it is, then mothers are expected to stay and constantly give that feeling of connectedness, that, oh, family is important, this is the kind of thing that I want and this is how I'll connect to God. But second, if these are majorly working class, I don't think the men are also helping you out. Why? First, they're obviously living paycheck to paycheck. The costs are rising in US constantly. The rents are much higher, which means you need to go and work constantly. So even if they're incredibly nice people, they just can't go for help out their woman or go and help out the mother that is present. Because the mother has to go through all the pains of this alone and suffer. But second, even it's bad for women who want to get jobs, because now there's an anticipation or expectation that these women might go and have to get pregnant at some point, and this is a narrative that is flowing around. That by virtue, oftentimes jobs just consider them less, and the economic policy that OG says now instead aligns with what we are saying, which is that women are just not seen as the ones who can give up the return that is required out of this. But fourth, it is also bad because this is the easiest thing that can happen for the conservative lobby to push back against abortion. It is already present right now in the country. For example, Roe v. Wade fading away post the case Planned Parenthood versus Casey, and OG agrees that dying by suicide is seen as morally illegitimate, which means this is the exact same thing that they use and say you're killing a life, you're doing something that is incredibly wrong, why are you even trying to do this? This becomes an important pushback against multiple layers of policies that certain states are trying, and it becomes easier for states to capture over this. It is obviously problematic because first, it harms the bodily autonomy of a woman who does not want to have the child. But second, trigger warning. But second, it can also be that this was unplanned or a teenage pregnancy that just happened. Third, it can also be because maybe the person was assaulted and has to bear the child as a response. This is literally happening in some states in USA. I'm not just making shit up. Why does this matter the most? First, on scale. I've already explained who are these people and why they're increasing on scale, which means on scale, these are the highest amount of people that are being harmed. Let's just average out maybe 50% of them are women, then a large population within USA is already being harmed. But second, they're also the most vulnerable because they have never had historic advantages that men have had. By which is they are pushed back down more and more and more. The reason this is more important than any claim that has been made at OG or CG is because this is something that is certain. This is something that is going to happen to people who exist in the real life and not someone who has not even taken the form of conception yet. They want to go and protect a zygote who may or may not be born. We want to go for and protect someone who's already born and has a life that they want to go forward and live. All of this ends up explaining why the biggest harm that can happen happens when you support the pro-natalist movement as opposed to anything else they say. But this also effectively beats out CG, because if this is the working class and they agree that education is not as high, the way in which they consume the research, if it takes place, is also not going to be great, and often the narrative is just easier to push back more and more, which means they've used the research as evidence and try to push the narrative in even worse ways to say we are actually justified in what we are doing, and it becomes tougher for any other movement to go forward and take shape against it. Second, sure.
Utility can only be assessed by perception. Yes, motherhood and pregnancy is hard, but most liberal women, when they have it, they never regret it. It's a very short-term sum of pregnancy, but the long-term happiness of having a child clearly trumps it.
It's on perception, but their case is more important because you can somehow perceive as Robin Ahuja that this kid will have a good life. This nonsense. Second part of the extension, just to flip OG, why it is immoral to have children in any world, in any way whatsoever, regardless of the movement. First, you do not consent in their responses, but you don't consent also. But then you cannot negatively consent, which means at best you are able to go for and argue that at least you keep it at a net neutral, which means you are fine with that child not coming forward at all. Second, life is obviously bad. First, climate change is a massive crisis that is affecting each and everyone in the world. If you think it is reversible, then you need to have far more proof to explain the same. Second, if the rise of conservatism is present, you don't even know. Maybe you're born in a minority family and that minority family is affected far more. Maybe you're born in a poorer family and that poorer family is affected far more. Which means even if your family is nice and loves you, you obviously compare this to things that you see amongst your friends. That your friend is getting something nicer as a gift and you are not. Maybe your friend is able to have better dinner that you are not able to get. And there are things that constantly affect you and make you feel that why was I even born? But why was I even born? But third, imagine being a gay person in a homophobic family or in a conservative family. It just hurts you because you can't even go for and actualize your own identity. You can't even feel good about yourself for things that you want to go forward and do. Even if the family is good, oftentimes they have to restrict you because there are social conditions that they need to follow. They need to show that, oh, we are still the part of the group that we are espoused by. We need to maintain our friendship with these people, which is why you cannot go for and talk about this, which is why you cannot go forward and do this. Which means even in the best case, and they say family, etc. is good, you still feel that life is suffering enough for you. The reason you should care about this more than whatever they say is because first, sadness is obviously worse. The harms affect you in a much longer way and you always think about them more than you win. Because I'm pretty sure Robin has been thinking about the 2 losses he has taken to me till now, as opposed to thinking what will happen if I would have won round 3 or round 2. Sorry, he lost those. But second, it also means this effectively flips why the moral claim is legitimate. It just means that it's as immoral as possible. On extent, we win because on their side you have more childs that you're pushing for. They're saying it's fine, let it be. With that, incredibly proud too.
I can't remember for the very fine speech in writing whenever you're ready.
Can I get a phone for a timer? हाँ
ये वॉशरूम में ओपन खोल के ये खुला है ना किस वाला आई डोंट नो व्हाट
Shout out to Suhail for this amazing team up. It's been very fun. Shout out to MLNC Depstock. I think we are doing very well. My juniors are here to spectate. Thank you for that. Shout out to Shashwat Dash. Let's remove top half out of this debate completely because they're uncomparative. First thing I will explain on why opening government case is irrelevant because this is a POI that I asked to opening opposition, right? They never explain why the pro-natalist movement uniquely is the tipping point for why people end up having more kids and why the narrative is so uniquely strong that you actually believe the rhetoric because their own analysis is there are so many barriers and restrictions put in place in terms of rhetorics but also in terms of financial capacities that you oftentimes do not have to meet the requirements to have those children in the first place to begin with. In which case, the majority of their analysis is dog shit. Let's weigh against our own opening first and then I'll move to off-bench. First, they say that US is becoming a manufacturing sector. US is an aging population. The analysis that Vishesh have for this is that the fertility rates are going down. If it is the case, then the entire fucking planet is an aging population because this is not enough analysis for you to believe why US uniquely is an aging population because that's not the criteria that you judge an aging population by. Second, they don't explain why there is a strong movement or the comparative harm as a consequence of this not supporting this pro-natalist movement, which is the extension that Suhail brings to the round. I'll explain the efficacy of it. Second, the weighing that Robin has at DPM is to say that life is good the ability of people to live is very good, and the families that you often engage with are oftentimes also very good. I'll explain why this is irrelevant first and then move on to the extension. First, a lot of these families, oftentimes in the United States, are not joint families, so the ability of you to interact with the majority of the people within your families and relatives is often extremely less, because you're often also burdened by the capitalist structures which forces you to work at most instances. The majority of the kids in these instances live in daycares and not with their families, because also the societal expectations that you force onto your kid, that you have to always be on the top of your class and all of those other things, often cause dissonance when your kid is unable to meet those expectations, in which case you're never able to gain the catharsis that is required for you to have a good upbringing in most instances, which is why Robin's weighing is out of this debate. Next, what is our extension? Which it is very simple. The motion states, this house supports the pro-natalist movement. What does the movement do in this debate? The movement does a few unique things. One, it is an amalgamation of multiple people who conform to the same beliefs or have the same ideologies, in which case this is an extremely supportive mechanism that allows for people to have some fallback mechanisms in instances where they do end up having the kid. So we will not debate whether this forces people to have a kid or it doesn't force people to have a kid. We will debate for the people who either are deciding to do so, have decided to do so, or already have a kid in most instances. Three unique benefits that you unlock on closing government. One, this allows for more information. The analysis for this is that information within one movement is oftentimes extremely concentrated, in which case there are different subsects within a movement where you're able to identify that this is a doctor, this is a professor, this is a researcher, this is an intellectual that exists within the movement who is likely to help me out in instances in which he actually relates to my experiences or has other experiences and seen other people have those experiences, in most instances in which you get help. Second, you often get access to support structures because these are similar people who have also faced the harms that Aniket Patra points out as member of opposition with regards to why your life is extremely shit as a mother as a consequence of having a child. In which case, you have a lot of people who are likely to help you out or give you advice or in the worst case, give you validation for having a child in the first place, because if opening opposition is correct, the people who do end up having a kid are fucked because of the absence of the pro-natalist movement. This is the unique benefit that we bring from closing government. This validation is uniquely important because it allows for you to internalize your feelings or to think that the decision that I made is not the worst decision that I made, and this is completely okay for me to have a kid and raise them in the best manner as possible. But lastly, you also get access to data points which ensure that you have enough information or enough guidance with regards to what to do at what stage of the pregnancy, what to do at what stage of infancy or teenage years, and all of those things. This allows for much better interactions between the parents and the kid, but also the ability of the parents to raise that kid oftentimes increases in better ways. Finally, the comparative harm that opening government misses. Before I go on, any clarification?
Who are these people that give you more information?
I just said these are researchers, professors, doctors who also become a part of the movement as a consequence of relating with those experiences and thinking that they have the same ideology, in which case they think what Robin says, that people should have kids, in which case they opt into the pro-natalist movement. This is a dumb POI. Lastly, why is the comparative extremely bad? In the absence of the pro-natalist movement, or if it does not have enough support or enough resources or capacity to work in the ways in which they do, anti-natalist movement comes up. I'll explain why this is extremely bad for existing populations. Anti-natalist movement does the exact same things, just the exact opposite of what the pro-natalist movement is doing. In which case, they make the idea of having a child extremely dystopic in nature. They actively push you to not have a kid. They actively alienate people who do end up having a kid, especially minorities who get worse off on that side of the house, which is the comparative that neither of benches defend in this round, which you should be able to track by now. Which means that the people who do end up having a kid oftentimes are unable to validate their opinions and feelings or internalize that what they have done is oftentimes correct, because this is a very confusing decision. It's a big decision that you make. There are a lot of barriers that you need to surpass before you actually end up taking a decision. Better PO actually, yes.
The end utility of their extension is giving research and analysis. You tell a black middle class family that you need to earn more in order to have kid. What even changes with
Rudraksh, you know that POI is bullshit, please sit down. Because our case is not research and information. Our case is the implication or that you derive from this research and information which does not exist on their side of the house, which is the burden that they have to define, which is why they don't. This was not a better POI, by the way. Lastly, why antinatalism is innately bad and how does this make pro-natalist movement? Because that's the second extension. We need competing narratives or counterbalancing narratives against the antinatalist movement. Because if they are able or able to restrict people from having kids or able to make people who have kids feel or look down upon themselves or other people to look down on the people who have kids is a worse harm that they need to defend on their side of the house. Because it's an irreversible harm of a life that is innately suffering oriented, in which case you always think that the decision that I made was wrong. Your parents tell you that the decision that you made were wrong. People around you tell you the decision that you made were wrong. The moments in which you interact in the narratives that abit themselves into algorithms and social media actively tell you that the things that you do are wrong, which is another mechanism for why dissemination of information is often also effective on us at the house, because when social media campaigns happen by the pro-natalist movement, it embeds itself into algorithms, in which case you often are shown all of these things, in which case the resource that actually happens on us at the house is accessible to the public, in which case we also explain their burden on accessibility. Finally, what is the importance of counterbalancing mechanisms? You need validation. Some people don't, some people do. We care about the people who do need that validation because this is a choice that you make for a lifetime, is the weighing that we do on closing government. In which case, once you do make that decision, it's extremely important for you to have that validation from people who actually support the decision that you made. On their side of the house, there are way less people who support that decision, in which case there is no benefit that you can credit on opening op or closing op because they have no comparative. In which case, the closing government extension stands in three very unique ways. One, the implication of you having an amalgamation or concentration of a lot of resources, but also information and data points that enable you to make better decision making or informed decision making, is just a net benefit that we can claim on closing government. This is important or better than opening government, because opening government's benefit of life is not suffering is extremely speculative, correctly pointed out by both of benches, but also by the analysis at government, which explains that oftentimes probably you don't get the benefits of life that they claim, and of benches correct, in which case the claim is speculative, which is the reason that they will lose, because Robin drops Vishesh's speech. Finally, what's the next benefit that we claim? The next benefit that we claim is that counterbalancing mechanisms exist against both of these movements, because antinatalism is the comparative that they had to defend, which is what I've been asking for the entirety of this debate. In which case, you need to believe that counterbalances are important, and one-sided narratives are oftentimes extremely harmful for the most vulnerable populations. And immigration, and nothing affects anti-immigration things, because ICE already exists. Trump is already cracking down all of these people. Proud.
Water?
It's here, it's here. Why PI stupid here? No questions, sir. I don't know these phones. Okay. It's okay, don't worry. Am I audible to the back? POIs, whenever, am I ready? The issue with closing government is they make you, okay wait, I have to start my time on my back. Okay. The issue with closing government is they want you to believe that this is a world where anti-natalism in itself, or like not having children, is the predominant narrative. But it's not true, because of literally what Robin tells you, like the fact that we know for a fact that motherhood in itself is a very joyous experience.
Here.
And we know for a fact that like you go ahead and like say having children is a very joyous experience itself. This is not a knife, for the very simple reason that it's what people believe in. In fact, what we want people to believe is the fact that like understand is the fact that motherhood in itself is a very intensive and a very painful process, narratives of which are very, very less, and as a result of that, this is something that we ought to prioritize in the round. Okay, so what are the alternate reasons for why people are going to continue to have children on either side, which is kind of going to beat gov bench as a whole? The first reason is, look, in the US, it's not like everybody's super liberal by the characterization of like, well, now at this point of time, Trump is winning, there's a lot of like, right individuals. So the cultural norms that exist, especially the poor rural areas in the West in itself, which comprises of like your parents, society, and pop culture in itself, promote the fact that you ought to go and have children, which means to say that existing like traditional families which indoctrinate you that having children is super important. But the second is, the joys of motherhood, as I explained to you, is not unknown to individuals. But the third thing is things like familial obligations, grandparents, religion, all of these things kind of push you and tell you that having a children, motherhood is a super joyous experience, and you ought to do it in itself. Which means to say, gov bench, by promoting natalism in itself, fuels into this entire conservative right-wing narrative that women ought to have children, that women ought to be the individuals who should be stuck within the sort of gender roles and confines of society as such. We are the side who actually tell you that you ought not to support the movement principally. It's not like we have to support the anti-natalist movement. We don't have the burden. We just have the burden to explain to you as to why the amount of harm that is created by the support of this movement itself is worse. The second thing is, how did this movement come about? Which literally breaks gov bench, because they never really explain to you who are these individuals, who are these researchers. I have zero clue. Two people.
POI.
First, religious right. These are individuals, as Aniket explains to you, who are disillusioned by the fact that people are moving towards casual relationships. People are having lesser number of children, which means to say they feel that you need to promote more number of children. But secondly, the economic right. Individuals who feel anti-immigration in itself is something that is, immigration is a super big problem. Also people who are like birth rate fanatics. So these are politicians who are racist. These are economists who are super conservative, who believe the immigration of labor in itself is something that we ought not to do, and we need to ensure there are more number of jobs in itself. So there is no explanation in terms of how the process of advocacy by the movement itself would be done in a super bad way. We proved to you that the process of advocacy would be done in a super bad way in itself, and as a result of which all of Aniket's harms unlock. Yes, OG.
Yeah. All our mothers still dread the 9 months of pregnancy and the fact that our fathers were not present. Yet they would never reverse it because they love all of us. Also, women also know pregnancy is bad. Like, come on, 7-year-old women
Robin,
also know that they can fucking choose.
Robin, you had your speech to explain all of this. Literally, the frame is working class individuals now have more children, and this is something that we already convinced you about, because it's unclear why specifically more liberal people who are sorting their life would now go and buy into this narrative in itself. Okay, let's now do some comparisons. Firstly, to closing government, no explanation in terms of who are these researchers, what are the sort of decision making, why do you get a better childhood, what are these sort of policies. A lot of burdens are missing. I'm unsure as to how you can give on that vote on that. But the second, this fuels the anti-natalism movement. How large is the anti-natalism movement? How many people actually know that having children is a super painful process? In which case, I'm not really sure why we ought to have a counterbalance against this, because we already have an existing preconceived social narrative in itself. CG out. First, then let's point to opening government. I'll give you a chance to respond again. Okay, look, the first argument that we get from Vishesh is actually a correct argument in terms of the now you fuel the economy if you have more individuals in itself. But the issue is with the explanation. Let's look at the economic issues he wants to drive. He says manufacturing capacity will get lower because by his logic you have lesser number of individuals. Firstly, US outsources most amount of its labor. So Apple literally has industries in China and Vietnam, which means to say it's unclear why specifically there's a reduction in some number of individuals means that you have lesser manufacturing capacity per se. But secondly, panel, notice US is literally an import heavy country. This is literally the reason why Trump is imposing tariffs on China and the EU and every other country, because it's a huge trade deficit, which means to say the amount of goods it's importing from other countries is significantly more. So it's unclear what are the sort of economic issues that are caused by a small reduction of people, but that's also speculative based on the buy-in of these individuals to have children itself. But I think the last thing quite simply is they never really prove the aging population crisis. I have no clue. India has a replacement rate of 2. Even if US has a replacement rate of 1.9, it does not really matter. Let's now respond
POI,
to Robin.
last chance.
Yes, Robin.
Women in US have far more knowledge, more freedom than women in India. They can choose. We're not putting them at a gunpoint. And they have still not responded to our benefits of family and that it is morally superior to have actually.
Okay, so the assumption that we have, because we've looked at pop culture, is that everybody in the US is super liberal and they all have access to great amount of information. Obviously, it's the case that there's a large amount of religious individuals, especially in rural areas. All the farmers that live in the agrarian economy in the US are supremely large. So I'm not really sure why these individuals have the capacity, but these are also individuals who believe into things like white supremacy. So if they believed into logic so much, I'm unsure why they would believe into it. Let's respond to Robin's argument that life is net good. Okay, his analysis is all the reasons why we ought to cope with hard times. So there are a lot of hard times. You're cognizant of mental health. There's things like therapy. You can fall back on your parents. But all of this is explanation of why you can cope with difficult circumstances, not why the process of life in itself is intrinsically giving you a net amount of benefit. I think we'll flip this. The first thing is, this is an increasing burden on parents, especially in the US, because obviously the US is going through an affordability crisis. There's a lot of job loss. Colleges are super expensive. So having more children or forcing individuals to have more children without proper family planning in itself puts more burden on these individuals, which in itself is bad, because I'm unsure to why, if they had the capacity, they won't have children either way. But the second thing is, the religious right now marginalizes you as a result of this. I've already explained to you why specifically they tell women that you ought to go and have children and be in gender roles. But it also necessarily means, okay, never mind, it's beaten either way.
That